Mhm. All right, welcome aboard here. Cities and Suburbs tonight with Kenny B. Special guest tonight on the show is Peter Kush. And we're going to talk baseball, Worcester, and the impact of Polar Park in Worcester. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome aboard Peter. Peter, you there?
Hey, Ken, nice to be with you.
All right, great, man. How you doing?
Good. A little wet, but can't complain.
Yeah, I know, huh? Hey,
Baseball weather. It's baseball weather, right?
yeah. So it is baseball weather. I love baseball weather, um, but I like it better when it's 90 degrees. Those guys are sweating their asses off, but they're freezing.
That's true. Well, this is like New England baseball weather. You want the other one, go down south.
Okay, yeah. So, all right. So today is April 15th. Peter Kush, good friend of us and Cities and Suburbs, knows a Worcester guy, knows a lot about housing and particularly about baseball. Peter's a great semi-pro. If I don't want to misclassify you, but semi-pro umpire in basketball and in baseball from, I guess, right from Little League right up, Pete. Right? So what do you do?
Yeah, I'll do anything. I'll do birthday parties. You pay me, I'll go. I'll wear my uniform. I'll toss the ball, strike, stop some kids out. I do. I umpire baseball. I do everything from the little kids to the big kids, and I do. I also referee basketball in the winter because God knows I need a little exercise.
So that's awesome. So how has COVID affected your schedule over the last year?
Well, last season was a weird season because we lost the entire high school season.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no high school ball. And then then they pushed us behind the mound. So we're actually calling balls and strikes from behind the mound, which was interesting to say the least. So it was a much more compressed schedule. And now this year it's going to be a very compressed schedule. The lower baseball level because the high school baseball season is going to go right after the football season, which is going on now.
Right.
So, May, June, July are going to be busy time. If you're looking to make some money as an umpire, it's going to be it's a great time to be an umpire, but it's going to be busy.
So actually, let me just ask. So this is not the you're not the Red Cross. I mean, you go out there, actually get paid for traveling. So and umpiring. So what is your scope of travel when you umpire, say, baseball games right now? Well, let me just ask in terms of let's just say the high school circuit, the local circuit. What's your area?
High school, I pretty much do all of Central Mass. I can go as far as North Middlesex, which is up at Pepperell, and as far south and as Quabbin, Quabog, Millbury. I do pretty much everything in Central Mass.
Wow. So now, primarily, you said you were behind the mound. So are you a first base coach? I mean, you probably can coach all umpire many of those spots, but are you mainly behind a plate?
Well, this is the first since COVID started. This is the last weekend. Was actually the first weekend I was behind the plate, which was kind of nice. It kind of made things sort of start to feel a little bit like normal again. Getting behind the catcher, talking to the catcher, talking to the batter. It's kind of a nice. You'd be surprised. You don't really see it when you watch games on TV, but there's a lot of conversations between the catcher, umpire, the batter, the umpire.
You think?
It's not just all swearing and asking where pitches were. There's a lot of small talk.
That's nice.
You go behind the mound, and it's bizarre because pitchers are just basket cases, and they talk to themselves. And
And that's so you were totally in shape. You were in the gym. You were ready to go right, left, north, south, east, west. Right? You weren't sore.
I was on the Joe West diet, so I was hot dogs and hamburgers.
Hey, so let's shift a little bit. So that's awesome, man. And I mean, I always watch you on Facebook and all the pictures you share. Peter Kush there on Facebook. Uh, so talk to me about and talk to us a little bit about. And you and I have had a lot of conversations about uh, the impact of Polar Park, the Worcester Red Sox, if you will, correct? The old Paw Sox, 50 plus years of history in Rhode Island, moving to Worcester, minor league teams, the shape of all those economics related to minor league baseball. So what do you think about the impact of Polar Park just in general in Worcester?
Well, I know that you and I have kind of been on differing sides about Polar Park. I think you were more of an advocate. I'm kind of more of a detractor towards the whole project.
And that's why we're talking about it, because I'm with you.
Exactly. And I mean, the other day I was driving down to work at the Genesis Club, and I had to blink because for a minute I thought I was in front of Camden Yards, because that's how the project certainly was pitched. I mean, and that's me being facetious a little bit. I think
I get you. Yep.
I think we have the city was sort of oversold on the project. And you look at the stadium and you ask, is this really worth $150 million?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it kind of looks like freight storage containers chopped up, and it doesn't. If you look at the original renderings of the stadium, it had a brick facade and it had kind of a nice entrance area. It looked very pretty. And in reality, what we ended up getting was kind of almost like a watered down version of that. And that's very disappointing, because the city is sinking a lot of money into this project for a baseball team which just owns, and the Woo Sox will be owned by the Boston Red Sox, who, as we all know, you're paying $15 for a cup of beer. They're not cash strapped.
Yeah, Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I spoke with someone the other day, and was actually the human resource person at AdCare Hospital when we were putting someone to work down there, helping someone get a job down there. And they were telling me that they spent $60 on some couple of seats. And I said, well, this is 60, where's this 10, 15, 10, 12, 15 nice family community? I say $60. $60. I mean, I know the closer you get to the diamond, the more luxurious it's supposed to be, and but I said $60. I had to actually ask her a couple of times. Is that really $60 for a minor league game? Okay, so right. I mean, am I off base there? Does that sound weird to you?
It's shocking, because when you look at it, and I mean, just for the record, I love baseball. I love minor league baseball especially, and I travel to all these different ballparks in the area. I've been pretty much everywhere you can go. I've been. But minor league baseball for a long time, up until the early 2000s, was very niche sport. It was for very hardcore fans, and then around the 2000s, and you see it becomes more kind of family friendly, and you see it especially with Pawtucket, because Pawtucket was always the Pawtucket Red Sox until the late 90s, early 2000s, where they really embraced I'm doing air quotes now, the Paw Sox logo. So you really incorporated the polar bear, you incorporated the term Paw Sox, and it kind of became a more family friendly thing. And that's kind of what minor league baseball has been since then. It's been a combination of locals going on their first or couple dates, friends go out to the ballpark, have a couple of beers, watch the game. But most importantly, it's been about families. It was an affordable option.
Right.
Instead of going talking to a buddy of mine, and he told me it was cheaper for him to fly down to Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City and buy tickets to the game than it was to take a family of four to a game at the Fenway Park and buy everybody a soda, a souvenir, and a food item. And that's kind of been the attraction of minor league baseball, is you get to meet the players, you get to see them before they were big.
Mm-hmm.
The most important thing is affordability.
Right, it's affordability, and it's a chance to catch. I mean, if you think about all the history coming out of Pawtucket. I mean, Jim Rice, Kevin Youkilis, Dustin Pedroia, even Jackie Bradley Jr. All those guys, made left tread marks, down there, and but they're in Worcester now. I mean, there's a great history with it. So, do you think, because you're around a lot, do you think that has it really impacted the Canal District? And let me just say, the Canal District, Kelly Square, Vernon Square, it was renamed Kelly Square actually after World War One. Used to be called Vernon Square before that. It was Kelly Square, named after a World War One veteran who was killed from the Kelly family. So it was renamed Kelly Square. But it's also one of the poorest right now. Even right now, it's still one of the poorest communities in Worcester demographically. So do you think this is going to gentrify it, or is it going to pick the area up? I mean, you've been around a lot of developments in ballparks and things like that on the minor league level, if you will. But I mean, we have the Worcester Market. We have all these nice, trendy restaurants opening up. What's the sustainability of that? And was that the right way to go? I don't know.
Well, I think, getting ready for this the last couple of days, I've been doing a little research and to kind of add to what I know, or what I've been assuming over the last few years. And it seems like ballparks seem to be, they try to use them as a catalyst. And there's a lot of talk about economic growth, about second chances, about civic revitalization. But over more than the last 2 decades, you've seen that it's really has not been a key to rebuilding struggling American cities. And just to kind of throw some numbers at you, from 1994 to 2001, that was kind of the golden year for building new stadiums. And you saw, especially New Jersey alone, they saw the construction of 7 brand new stadiums. And granted, they were in the kind of fledgling Atlantic League, which is an independent baseball league, so there's no connection to Major League Baseball. But between building stadiums in Atlantic City, Newark, or Camden, New Jersey, all in Bridgeport, Connecticut, too, all those stadiums are now gone, except for Atlantic City, which I believe there's an issue with homeless people squatting in the stadium. But the one that really stuck out to me, because it really reminded me about what's going on in Worcester, was what they did in Camden. Now, Camden is not Worcester. I will preface it by saying there's some differences between Camden, New Jersey, and Worcester.
Thank you.
But the stadium itself was gorgeous, and I had the pleasure of actually going to it. And what you have is it's right in the shadows of really the mighty Ben Franklin Bridge. If you've never seen the Ben Franklin Bridge, it's pretty freaking cool.
All right.
It's just a massive bridge. It's right on the river. So Camden is right on the other side of Philadelphia. Right.
I know my in-laws. My in-laws lived in my mom and dad-in-law, who are going to pick up the show tomorrow morning. They always watch us in retro. But yeah, they'll. I guarantee my father-in-law, Roger, and Karen, and my mom and mom-in-law, they'll definitely know what you're talking about. So sorry, keep going. Yeah.
No, good story. But basically, what they did was they used the stadium almost as the keystone to redeveloping that area. So they built the stadium, they built the storefront, they built an aquarium, and they actually ended up building a light rail that connected Philadelphia shoot Camden because there was an issue, a question of if people were actually going to want to drive into Camden, New Jersey at night, which you really don't want to do that. But all in all, the stadium cost around $25 million for this. Now again, this was back in 2000, so you have to kind of go for inflation on this. The stadium itself cost around $25 to $30 million. Then you had about $50 million for the aquarium, and you had about $18 million being pumped in for the light rail, and then you had a couple, million thrown in for the storefront redevelopment.
Wow.
And the team lasted little less than 10 years, and they're gone. And the stadium was eventually demolished, and you see that with a lot of these stadiums. They have a very short shelf life.
Yeah.
And you saw it, and Worcester especially has kind of a sketchy history of supporting pro sports teams.
Big time.
Going back to the Ice Cats, going back to the Worcester Sharks.
The Worcester Counts.
The Tornadoes. Yeah, you remember this? The Tornadoes were a hot ticket for the first 2 years.
Yeah, because of their name.
Right.
The tornadoes that killed like 93 people.
Well, it was a very questionable decision, but actually I kind of like the uniforms. But they but after the first 2 years, the attendance kind of went down.
Yeah.
And because it's like the shiny object in the room, you're attracted to it, and then over time, they couldn't even give tickets away.
Well, let me weigh in on that. Let me weigh in on the Worcester Tornadoes. I mean, they were the Can-Am League, I believe. But at that time, that's what made me a proponent of bringing actually affiliated baseball to Worcester. Okay. Worcester's history goes back to, the 1700s, and we've been settled and dominated by people from Boston for hundreds of years. And we were always like never good enough to get a minor league team from Boston. So we were left with like the Tornadoes. But I went to a couple of games, but first of all, the food was terrible, right?
Right, and the quality was bad too.
The quality was bad. It was kind of like a circus when I saw one team from New Hampshire playing in khakis, camo to honor whatever, and it just had nothing to do with pure baseball, and it was unaffiliated baseball. It wasn't, and it was so uninteresting. I would rather go to take up a lawn chair, go down to Cape Cod, pay $5 and go behind some high school and watch some guys that are actually going to make it to the big leagues.
Right, you don't have to pay $5 because the Cape League is free. But just to kind of go along those lines, I mean, if you're right, the Tornadoes are independent, but they're a low-level independent team. I mean, I love indie ball because I'm a masochist, and the Atlantic League is the best, and then it kind of trickles down. The Can-Am League doesn't exist anymore; it's the Frontier League now.
Right.
If you want to look at affiliated teams, I pulled up kind of some of the attendance numbers for the last few years, and you see I'm looking at McCoy Stadium. In 2016 they were averaging about 6,000 fans a game. By 2019 they were averaging just above 5,000.
Wow.
So but you see it elsewhere because I pulled up Lowell and Lowell's double A. Lowell single A.
Mm-hmm.
You pull it up, they were averaging around 2016, they were averaging 3,700, and then by 2019, they were averaging 2,900.
Wow.
So you see the drop off, and I'm not saying baseball is not popular because I love baseball, but you look at it and you say, how many people are actually going to go? And then the other thing too is how many people are going to come from outside of the city.
Right.
I travel to a lot of these games, and unless you're like a weirdo like me who likes to drive to like Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, or Binghamton, New York.
I've been there. I like Harrisburg. I've been there.
I'm planning on going to Binghamton in a few months when the Rebel movies start.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's mostly locals. So you have to wonder, you're playing basically almost a full major league schedule, a little bit shorter. Can you keep the interest of people in the area that long. And I guess that's my overall concern. And a lot of it, again, goes back to the stadium cost because, again, Polar Park, which was designed by the same company that designed both Camden Yards and what used to be Coca-Cola and is now Saline Field up in Buffalo.
Okay.
I mean, Saline Field cost $42 million back in 1990. With inflation, that's about $91 million today. So Saline Field, who was designed by the same firm, costs $60 million less, and the stadium looks a heck of a lot better.
Wow.
And I know the Boston Globe put out this article today, that they're kind of fawning over the stadium. But from what I've seen, Las Vegas, which previously was the number one most expensive ballpark, which just got eclipsed by Polar Park because of, cost overruns, that stadium costs a little bit less than Polar Park, and it looks like it offers so much more, including a swimming pool in center field.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's kind of what are you getting for your buck?
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
And go ahead, Ken, because I do want to talk about MLB and its history with minor league baseball because I know you're a historian and you kind of you love a good history story, but minor league baseball for a long time was independent from Major League Baseball. They had separate owners.
Right.
Ben Mondor used to own the Pawtucket Red Sox, and quite honestly, he'd probably be rolling in his grave right now if he knew what was going on.
Wow.
But they were given the ability to operate independently of Major League Baseball. And 3 years ago, Major League Baseball kind of led a hostile takeover of MILB, which is minor league baseball, and they eliminated 42 teams. And that's my other concern, is that when you see professional sports teams, they hold cities hostages. And you see where they kind of did that to Pawtucket, where they basically said, you get to choose between building a new stadium or building this hospital, because Pawtucket didn't have money for both, and Pawtucket ended up building the hospital because it's what they needed.
Right,
and
of course.
You look at where this money can go, and you have to ask, is it best served by building a stadium? And honestly, I don't know if it is.
Right.
Because who's to say the Red Sox aren't going to come back in like 10 years and say, we want the city to front, $30 million to fix up the stadium and make improvement. And if you don't do it, we're going to put the team in Springfield.
Exactly. So, it's funny when we talk about $130 million though, right? How much is Mookie Betts making right now?
I think he's making like $250 million or
something
like that.
All right. So when we talk about a ballpark, right? This guy could have built this friggin' thing 3 times. So when I hear money, $130 million in that I think that resonates to us folks who are, paycheck to paycheck, month to month or whatever. We hear $130 million. When I first heard $130 million, I was like, okay, that's really not a lot of money. It's a lot of money, but it's a lot of money depending on where it comes from, right? And it's also an investment, right? And it's also the sustainability of that $130 million, which actually was a $240 million multi-use area right now. So the Canal District, the ballpark is all part of a urban renewal, if you will, gentrification project, but it's all part of a $240 million makeover of the canal area, which is an old district of Worcester. It's a multi-use area now. They want residential, they want office buildings. I'll say this, what's that going to do to, and from housing, is that going to, not to diverge from what you were saying, because you're totally on the game, but the impact, okay, the economic impact, is it going to create a great spin-off for the whole city, or is it going to create pockets of gentrification, which we saw in downtown with the beer gardens, knocking down this? Now we have a ballpark, and We're reconfiguring Kelly Square to the Peanut. I mean, what do you see as far as the economic value of this compared to based on your experience with other cities?
Well, I mean, when you look at the housing market, Worcester is one of the toughest housing market in Massachusetts. That's outside of Boston. We talk about it all the time at work. How much apartments cost right now,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to drive up the market. It's going to push a lot of people out. And I think it honestly depends on if you believe in the old adage that the rising tide lifts all ships. I mean, if you full-heartedly believe that, then then it'll probably be good for that. But it depends on how you feel about gentrification. I know it's a touchy topic. Personally, I believe a little bit of gentrification is never bad.
Right. I agree.
It just depends on what it leads to. When it leads to more, it leads to redlining and it leads to people getting pushed out. That's when it becomes an issue. But I do see the development in downtown as a step in the right direction. But I think with the baseball stadium, again, with the finances, you're basically putting all your eggs in that stadium. And if the stadium succeeds, it'll pay off. But the other thing to remember, too, is that originally the stadium was going to be producing revenue for the city based on taxes. Those are supposed to be going now. They got deferred to 2024. And who's to say? So we're not going to be seeing a single penny from the tax dollars from the stadium until the earliest of 2024. So here you have, again, this company, it's not a company, but you have an owner who has more money than God, who now doesn't have to pay taxes on the stadium until 2024. Meanwhile, he's going to be pocketing the difference. It's a little bit baffling that the city, because the city has done a lot of good things, I think. And I've been very critical of Worcester over the years, and some of the decisions they've made, because I think the city's kind of tried to use cookie cutter themes that other cities use. Like they try to pull ideas from Providence, which is why Worcester is so fascinated with hotels. I mean, Ken, every time the city talks about your renewal, it's attached to at least 2 hotels.
I know.
That's because Providence has a ton of hotels. And
well,
they always try to kind of
desirable hotels, though. People that want to have their weddings there along the waterfront and a nice canal and you said that many moons ago, Peter, that Worcester loves its hotels, it loves its TIFs. What can we actually get out of that? But past COVID, pre-COVID, I think we were on the way to something special and beautiful. But who knows? I've been in Worcester long enough to know that the Worcester leadership, sometimes they go that far, but they're kind of like the Buffalo Bills. They don't know how to win a Super Bowl 4 times in a row, by the way. You know what I mean?
They can't close the games. And part of it, too, is the city leadership. And that's a 3-hour conversation about elected officials in Worcester. But, again, part of the struggle for Worcester has been, it doesn't necessarily, the way the system is set up in Worcester, you don't always get the best and brightest in council positions because, it doesn't pay well. It's not a full-time job, but it's yet not a voluntary job. So you kind of get a weird bag of people who have jobs. They're not great jobs, but it pays the bills.
Right.
And I think it's kind of been a wrong approach for Worcester, but that's kind of my opinion on that. But again, Worcester has done a lot of good things. I'm not knocking. I think the Worcester market is great. I've gone in there. I've eaten lunch there. It's a great little place. It's a great kind of little corner. But again, you can look at it like this. Would it have been better to expand the market and expand things out rather than build the ballpark? Because the other thing too about a ballpark is the use is very limited. You can only really use it during baseball season. Maybe you do an odd concert in the winter time or in the fall, but it's primarily going to be used as a baseball stadium because they have to.
Well, they promoted this. They promoted it as a facility that they wanted open where people maybe they could rent it and have their wedding there. And, they promoted it as this almost like, Crompton Field, like it was open to everybody kind of thing. And, but I think you're right. There's, as the reality sets in, I think there's going to be only so many ways you can use a ballpark year round, right?
They said the same thing. They said the same on Duffy Field. That's the big plan with Duffy Field. They want to build a new training site for Doherty, and a lot of residents are saying, "Whoa, why are you going to put a turf field and a fence around a public park?
Right.
What sense does that make? You're going to kill a neighborhood park just so Doherty has a turf field that they can practice on."
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And the city the whole time has been like, "Oh no, everybody can use it." But let's be real about it.
Right.
Not everybody's going to use that. It's going to be used as Doherty, and it's going to be chained off the rest of the year.
Wow. And that's the whole dispute going on with that right now. Right? That's the whole dispute going on with I've been reading that in the paper.
Yeah, they actually just filed some of the residents actually filed a lawsuit against the city, so they're gonna fight that one out. I mean, I grew up in that neighborhood, and I grew up playing on Duffy Field, and it's a gem. I mean, it's a West Side park, and it's so you don't see it unless you're driving through because it's a very neighborhood park. But there are kids there, and you're going to basically take down the playground, you're going to take down everything, and you're going to install turf fields because we all know turf fields are great. I mean, you can play on them all year long, but at the same side, it's like, why do you want a turf field? They're expensive, and they're expensive to maintain. Mm-hmm. But B, it's not. When I was a kid, I didn't want to play on a turf field. I want to get dirty. I want to get grass stains, so my mom would have to clean it out of my clothes.
Right.
You don't want to go to the park with your friends and play tag or capture the flag on turf.
Right. So Peter, in closing, hey, listen, this has been a great. Let's do this. I'll give us. Unfortunately, some of the folks that I wanted to tune in tonight, but they're going to get us on the flip side, so don't worry about that. But let's bring back some of, baseball, our community, some of the good things moving ahead. I mean, what do you see? To me, baseball is such a pure sport, to me, America grew up with baseball. It's the only sport. You can say football is the biggest spectator sport. NASCAR is the biggest spectator sport. I get it. But baseball is really an indigenous sport to the United States of America through the Civil War, based on the English game of rounders, the spirit, the community. And I have to think that Worcester wants that for Worcester. Worcester wants community. It's not just about wasting money or, doing this or that. But I think in my time in Worcester, we saw the failed mall at the Galleria. Okay.
Twice.
The whole urban renewal thing and the Worcester housing thing that started in the 60s to the 70s, knocking down poor communities, building Worcester housing buildings. But, I do want to say that sometimes, we get caught up in, the trendiness. I don't think right now the ballpark is as trendy as urban renewal was back in the 60s. But going forward, what are some of the positives that Polar Park can do for Worcester?
Well, I think the fact is, and this is, and baseball is my favorite sport. It's always been my favorite sport. I know I do 250 baseball games a year. But there's something inherently pure about baseball that takes us back to our roots because, quite honestly, it's the most American thing ever. I mean, you could be down 100 runs in the ninth inning, but technically, it's not over until it's over. It really does give the American spirit, and it kind of mirrors Worcester. No matter how far you're down, you still have a chance to get back up because you always have the last up. And the one thing about baseball is, and you mentioned the Cape League, and I love the Cape League, and I go out there a couple times a year. maybe a dozen or two, and see the teams. There's something that like I'll take a day off on a Thursday or a Friday. Or I'll be up there on a Sunday, and I love Kachua Cavaliers. They're a great team, and their ballpark is absolutely gorgeous. It's not behind a baseball stadium. It's not behind a high school. It's kind of tucked into the woods, right on the Santuit River, and you're just sitting there. And there's no jumbotron. There's no mascots. There's no loud distractions. It's baseball in its purest form. And you sit there and you feel the salt on your hair, your face, you got the breeze blowing through your hair. And quite honestly, it takes you back to a time. And baseball is beautiful. And I really do hope, and I'll be there. I'll go to a couple of the games, and I hope that it's a success. I do. I'm not here to cheer against the city. I'll keep my fingers crossed, and we'll see what happens.
That's awesome, Peter, man. Hey, look, man, this has been great, and I'm gonna give us a little send off. Peter Kush here from Cities and Suburbs. Please check out the show, and definitely going to be talking with Peter in the future. But the guy is the guy. He is the man, and he knows his stuff. And we're going to ditch out right now. And Peter, thanks for the cast, man. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Ken. Appreciate it. Take it easy, partner.
All right, brother. Take me out to the ball game. All right, Peter. Thanks, man. All right. Thanks, Peter. Mr. Kush for being here. You're the man. All right. Talk to you soon.